The Alien War Council chamber was vast, built from black stone and lit by rivers of glowing energy that ran along the walls like veins. Hundreds of alien generals sat in tiered seats that curved around the center of the hall, their faces sharp with arrogance. Above them, suspended in the air, a massive holoscreen showed the battlefield outside. A single human ship, small and scarred, floated in open space, and around it stretched a fleet of 500 enemy warships. The alien generals laughed, their voices echoing like thunder in the chamber. To them this was already over. A lone human vessel had no chance against such power. One general leaned forward, his scales shimmering in the light, and hissed to the others, "The human captain will surrender in minutes. None can stand against this." Another replied with a cruel smile, "Perhaps we should broadcast his surrender across the galaxy, so every species will see how weak humans truly are." The laughter grew louder, rolling through the chamber like a storm. But then, the holoscreen zoomed closer to the human ship, and they saw him. Captain Elias Ward stood on the bridge of his ship, the Resolute, a vessel built for exploration but now cornered in war. The ship trembled under the pressure of enemy lock-ons, the lights flickered, and smoke still lingered from earlier skirmishes. Around him his crew worked with pale faces and nervous hands. They were tired, wounded, and outnumbered beyond reason. One of his officers turned from her console, her voice shaking. "Captain, we cannot hold. If we surrender, they may spare us. Please, give the order." Another joined, "Sir, there are families on board, they will kill us all if we resist." The crew waited for his reply, their eyes filled with fear, but Elias did not speak at once. He walked slowly to the center of the bridge, the cold blue light of the galaxy shining through the viewport onto his scarred face. He had fought in too many battles to count, and he knew what surrender meant to these enemies. It meant humiliation, torture, and the death of everything he swore to protect. He looked at his crew, his eyes steady and unblinking. His voice when it came was calm, hard as steel, and filled with something none of them could mistake. "Humans don't surrender. Not to you. Not ever." The words cut through the bridge like a blade. His officers stared at him in silence, their fear clashing with the fire that now burned in his tone. One young ensign whispered, "But Captain, we are only one ship." Elias looked at him and replied with the faintest of grim smiles. "One ship is enough." Outside, the alien fleet tightened their formation, preparing to fire. The alien council chamber filled with the sounds of generals cheering, eager for the final strike. Yet as they leaned closer to the holoscreen, something unsettled them. The human captain did not look afraid. He did not look broken. He stood like a man who had already decided his fate, and that kind of resolve was something they did not understand. One general frowned, his mandibles twitching. "Why does he not surrender?" Another hissed back, "It is madness. He is trapped." But the unease spread, quiet at first, then louder, until the laughter began to fade. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence gave way to the soft hum of machines, and Elias Ward stood with hands behind his back, his shadow long against the deck. He had no illusions about the odds. 500 ships were enough to crush worlds. His ship was wounded, his weapons drained, his shields failing. By every measure of logic, this was the end. Yet humans were not creatures of logic alone. They were creatures of defiance, born on a world where storms and beasts once tried to erase them, and still they endured. That memory of humanity's endless survival burned inside Elias like a second heart. He raised his head and said to his crew, "They think this is over. They think we will kneel. But we are not finished." His crew exchanged uncertain glances. They had trusted him through battles before, but this was different. This was a wall of fire no one could pass. Still, his words stirred something in them, the smallest ember of defiance, the same ember that had carried their species across the stars. In the alien council chamber, the holoscreen showed the human ship turning slightly, its engines glowing brighter than expected. Some of the generals sat back in their seats, suddenly less eager. They had seen surrender many times before. They had seen fear, begging, desperation. But this was new. The human captain stood unshaken, his expression calm, almost daring them to come closer. "Something is wrong," one alien whispered. "No creature should face death with eyes like that." Another barked, "He cannot win. It is a bluff." But still they leaned forward, their laughter gone, their unease growing. What weapon did this captain hold? What secret did the humans hide? Back on the Resolute, Elias allowed himself a breath, slow and steady. His decision was made, and there was no turning back. He thought of Earth, of the generations who had fought before him, and of the lesson written in their blood. Surrender was death, but defiance was survival. He turned once more to his crew, and though fear still shone in their eyes, they straightened in their seats. For in that moment, they were no longer a cornered ship. They were human, and humans had never been broken. Elias spoke one final time, his voice low but carrying the weight of history. Remember this day. If we fall standing. The holoscreen in the alien council chamber flickered, showing the human captain in close detail, his words caught by their translators, echoing through the chamber. Humans don't surrender. Not to you. Not ever. The chamber grew silent. Generals who moments ago laughed now sat frozen. They had seen defiance before, but not like this. Not from a species they thought weak. Not from a captain who faced 500 warships without fear. Something in his voice was dangerous, something that whispered of storms yet to come. The alien commanders leaned forward, their eyes narrowing, their claws tapping nervously against stone tables. For the first time in centuries, the council felt something they had not felt in a long, long time. It was not triumph. It was not victory. It was unease. The enemy fleet moved closer through the endless black of space, 500 ships forming a noose around the lone human vessel, their engines glowing like a wall of fire. On the bridge of the Resolute, the air was heavy, thick with the sound of failing systems and the quiet breaths of a crew who knew the end was near. Alarms flickered red across the panels, and the soft hum of the ship carried the weight of exhaustion. Yet Captain Elias Ward stood unshaken, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the stars as if he were waiting for something invisible to arrive. His officers whispered in hushed tones, each one torn between faith and despair, until one of them finally stepped forward. "Captain," she said, her voice trembling, "they are preparing to fire. We cannot survive this. What are your orders?" Elias did not move at once. His eyes shifted toward the great swarm of ships beyond the viewport, his face carved in shadow and light, then at last he spoke, his tone cold, deliberate, final. "We do not run. We do not kneel. We show them what it means to face humanity." With those words he leaned closer to his command console and whispered one single word, so soft it almost vanished into the hum of the ship. "Now." At first nothing happened. The alien commanders in their war council chamber laughed again, their tension breaking into mockery. "The human has lost his mind," one sneered, slamming his claw against the stone table. Another shouted, "Fire on him! End this farce!" Yet in the silent gulf between ships, something stirred. A pulse, faint and unseen by the naked eye, rippled outward from the Resolute like a whisper in the dark. Invisible to those who looked only with sight, it spread across the fleet in widening circles, silent as death itself. Alien radars blinked once, twice, then failed. The vast network of communication between the ships filled with static. Weapon systems went dark, targeting locks vanished, navigation consoles erupted in sparks. Panic rose within the alien crews as their proud war machines, flawless and vast, suddenly became blind. The laughter in the council chamber fell away in confusion as the holoscreen showed ships drifting in disarray. "What is this?" one general demanded, his mandibles clicking with fear. "Why are the ships not firing?" Another turned sharply to his advisors, "What technology is this?" "No species has ever," but his words died as the holoscreen flared white. The first alien flagship, larger than a mountain, shuddered as its shields collapsed in silence, then exploded into a storm of fire without a single human shot being fired. The chamber erupted in chaos, voices screaming, claws slamming tables, eyes wide with disbelief. On the Resolute, the crew sat frozen, their consoles alive with warnings yet no weapons fired. "Captain," whispered one officer, staring at the chaos unfolding outside, "what have we done?" Elias's face remained unreadable, his eyes locked on the battlefield where giants were falling. The pulse spread again, deeper, stronger, tearing through systems with merciless precision. To the aliens it felt as though their ships had turned against them, their technology betraying them in the moment of victory. In truth, this was no accident, no trick of chance. It was the Echo Pulse, a weapon so ancient and forbidden that even humans themselves had sworn never to use it again. Built in the dark age of Earth's forgotten wars, it had been designed not to destroy, but to silence. It did not fire missiles or beams. It reached into the very hearts of machines and made them forget themselves. Against the echo pulse, even the strongest fleet was no more than drifting metal. The crew of the Resolute knew fragments of the story, rumors of an old Terran weapon locked away by law and shame, but they had never believed it was real. And yet here it was, singing through the void, and Elias Ward had unleashed it. The alien commanders watched in horror as a second ship erupted, its engines flaring before collapsing into molten shards. A third soon followed, torn apart by its own reactor. Entire sections of the fleet spiraled helplessly, colliding into one another, reduced to chaos. The chamber filled with panicked voices. This cannot be. Humans were weak, they were primitive, how can they wield such a weapon? And yet, as they shouted, a colder truth crept in, whispering through the hall. If one ship, one captain, one man could wield this kind of power, what else were humans hiding? What secrets lay buried in the shadows of their history? The generals had mocked them as children, but perhaps these were not children at all. Perhaps humanity had only been sleeping. On the bridge, Elias said nothing. His crew stared at him, some in awe, some in terror. "Captain," whispered a young ensign, "if this is real, we will be marked forever. They will never forgive us." Elias did not look away from the flames blooming outside. "They already chose war," he answered, his voice low. "This is the price." Another officer leaned closer, her voice breaking, "But this weapon was banned. You will make us a target for the whole galaxy." Elias turned to her then, his eyes sharp, his face carved by determination. "Do you think we were ever safe? Do you think surrender would have spared us? No. They wanted our end. Now they will remember us instead." His words hung heavy in the air, and though fear still clung to the crew, none dared speak again. The holoscreen in the alien council chamber shook with the image of burning ships, flames stretching across the black canvas of space. Generals who once roared with laughter now sat silent, their claws trembling, their eyes wide with something they hated to admit. It was not just shock. It was fear. For the first time, they wondered if the galaxy had underestimated humanity, if their mockery of this species had blinded them to the storm hiding beneath their fragile surface. And as another ship fell into fire, silence spread through the chamber like frost. The humans had unleashed something beyond comprehension, and the balance of power that had stood for centuries was now broken. Captain Elias Ward stood unmoving, his ship scarred, his crew shaken, but his voice remained steady as the battlefield burned. "We gave them a chance for peace," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "They chose war. Now, they will see the price." His words were carried by the alien translators across the chamber, echoing through the ears of every commander, every soldier, every civilian who watched the broadcast across the stars. And as the last echoes faded, the galaxy understood one terrible truth. The human captain had not surrendered, and because of that, the galaxy itself would pay. Across the galaxy, the broadcast spread like wildfire, carried on stolen signals and broken transmissions, reaching worlds that had never before cared about humans, reaching stations where merchants and mercenaries paused mid-trade, reaching homes where children stared wide-eyed at glowing screens. They all saw the same thing, an alien fleet of 500 ships collapsing into chaos, fire rolling across the stars, while a single human vessel drifted in the center like a ghost, untouched and unbroken. The message played again and again, Elias Ward's voice translated into 100 tongues. "We gave you a chance for peace. You chose war. Now, you will see the price." In the War Council chamber, the alien generals shouted in confusion, some demanding the feed be cut, others insisting it was too late, that the words were already out, already echoing into the ears of billions. And indeed it was too late. On frontier colonies, alien farmers froze with their tools in hand, staring at the image of one human ship surrounded by fire. In the shining halls of great empires, rulers frowned, their advisors whispering in their ears. Some whispered fear. Some whispered rage. And some whispered possibility. For if humans truly wielded such power, then perhaps aligning with them, rather than mocking them, might shift the balance of power that had ruled for centuries. On the Resolute, the crew watched the reports pour in, intercepted fragments of alien chatter that filled the bridge with static and broken words. "Human captain, impossible," echo pulse, crackled through the speakers. "Entire fleet destroyed, no surrender, dangerous," followed another. Officers looked to Elias, their faces pale. One finally asked, his voice breaking under the weight of what they had done, "Captain, do you understand what this means? You have shown them we possess weapons they feared were myths. You have painted a target on Earth itself." Elias did not flinch, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Earth was always a target," he replied, his tone flat. "Now they will think twice before reaching for it." His words carried no triumph, no joy. They were cold, carved from the stone of necessity. He had not unleashed the echo pulse to win glory. He had done it because the alternative was extinction. But across the galaxy, perception twisted faster than any truth could catch. Some saw Elias as a hero, a symbol of defiance, a reminder that humans were not to be dismissed. On hidden colonies where humans struggled under alien rule, whispers of his name began to rise. They called him the captain who would not kneel. Yet in the seats of power, among the alien lords and war councils, he became something else entirely, a monster, a threat too dangerous to exist. Propaganda machines spun into motion. Broadcasts painted him as a terrorist who had slaughtered fleets without mercy. They showed the echo pulse not as a desperate defense but as an unprovoked act of war. And still, the people whispered, and still, the name Elias Ward spread like sparks across dry grass. The alien council chamber boiled with fury. One general slammed his clawed hand onto the stone table, roaring, "This cannot stand. If we let this human live, if we let his kind wield such weapons, then no empire will be safe. We must unite, we must hunt him down, we must burn his world to ash." Another hissed in reply, "You speak of burning his world, but you forget, we do not know what other weapons they hide. What if this is not the only echo pulse? What if humanity has 100 more? 1,000? Are we ready to risk everything?" The room erupted into chaos, voices colliding, fear battling pride. And above them, the holoscreen still burned with the last image of the battle, a lone ship standing unbroken among ruins. It haunted them, and none dared look too long into those flames. Meanwhile, Elias ordered his crew to transmit a final message before their systems shut down. It was simple, clear, and sharp as a blade. Humanity seeks no conquest. Humanity seeks only survival. But hear me now. If you come for us, if you push us to the wall, we will not kneel. We will not break. We will not surrender. The message was broadcast into every open frequency, and though most fleets jammed it, enough fragments slipped through to spread further. On distant mining colonies, enslaved humans lifted their heads with sudden hope. In alien palaces, kings and queens leaned back in uneasy silence. And in pirate dens and shadow markets, smugglers exchanged knowing glances, calculating how much profit could be made if humans rose in power. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell after the transmission ended. The crew waited for Elias to say more, but he did not. He simply lowered himself into the captain's chair, his eyes hard, his body heavy with the weight of what had been done. He knew what would come. The galaxy would not forgive. Empires would not forget. He had forced the hand of every power, and now the hunt would begin. Yet even in that heavy silence, something shifted among his crew. Where before there had been only fear, now there was something else. A spark of pride, small but growing. For they had not surrendered, and because of that, the galaxy had seen them. In the alien council chamber, an older general, his eyes clouded by age but sharp with memory, leaned forward and spoke in a low, dangerous voice. "I fought humans once, long ago. Even then they were stubborn. I warned you they were dangerous. Now you see. They will not surrender. They will fight until they are dust. And if we are not careful, they will drag us all down with them." His words hung in the air like smoke. No one laughed this time. No one mocked. The laughter of before was gone, replaced by a silence that felt heavier than stone. And as news spread faster than light, through whispers and screens, through fear and hope, one truth settled over the galaxy like a shadow. A single human captain had stood against 500 warships, had refused to kneel, and had shattered the illusion of alien supremacy. From that moment forward, every empire, every world, every leader would remember the name Elias Ward. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy itself felt something it thought had been forgotten: uncertainty. The galaxy did not forgive, and it did not wait. Within days of Elias Ward's message, fleets began to move, not one empire but many, rivals who had warred for centuries now united by a single purpose, the destruction of the human captain who had defied them all. From shining capitals and dark border worlds, ships launched into the void, their banners different but their mission the same. Hunt the human. Erase his name. Burn his world. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew watched transmissions pour in, fragments of propaganda spreading through every channel. The terrorist Elias Ward is to be captured alive if possible, executed if not. Some broadcasts showed his face, others showed only the burning wreckage of alien fleets, twisting the story into a warning. He was no longer simply a captain. To the galaxy, he had become the phantom of humanity, a symbol of rebellion, a shadow to fear and destroy. Elias sat silent as his officers reported enemy movements, his jaw tight, his eyes on the star map glowing above the table. Red marks spread like a disease across the map, fleets converging, cutting off paths, closing the net. One officer whispered, "They will not stop. They will chase us until the end of time." Elias replied, his voice flat and certain, "Then we make them bleed for every step." The chase began in the outer rim, where the Resolute slipped between shattered moons and jagged debris fields, the alien fleets thundering behind. 100 ships cornered them there, weapons charged, only to find themselves dragged into the gravity well of a collapsing gas giant that Elias had calculated with cruel precision. Dozens were lost, crushed under storms of burning hydrogen, their screams carried across open comms. The crew of the Resolute stared in awe as they escaped again, their captain's calm guidance leading them through chaos. Days later, the hunt drove them into the scorching belt, a sea of asteroids glowing with the heat of a newborn star. Enemy cruisers tried to surround them, but Elias twisted through the belt, using the rocks as shields, turning the star's flares into weapons that fried alien hulls. "How does he know where to go?" whispered one crew member, her voice trembling with both fear and admiration. No one answered, for even they did not fully understand. It was as if Elias saw the battlefield in ways others could not, as if every star, every black hole, every unstable orbit was a weapon waiting to be used. The chase lasted weeks, then months, each encounter more desperate, each escape more impossible than the last. Entire fleets were lost in their pursuit, not to human weapons but to space itself, bent by Elias's hand. On alien worlds, whispers grew louder. Merchants told stories of a phantom ship that slipped through death itself. Soldiers muttered of a human captain who could not be caught. Children in hidden colonies began playing games where one shouted, "I am Elias Ward," and the others tried and failed to trap him. His legend grew even as the galaxy burned resources to crush him. And in the Alien War Council chamber, the generals no longer laughed. Their voices cracked with anger and fear as they argued endlessly. "This is not possible," one shouted. "No ship can outrun 1,000. No captain can fight the stars themselves." Yet every report told the same story: fleets destroyed, traps reversed, hunters turned to prey. But with every escape, the Resolute grew weaker. Its engines screamed from overuse, its hull bore scars deeper than steel could hide, and its crew staggered under exhaustion. They lived on rations so thin their cheeks hollowed, slept in shifts so restless their eyes bled red, yet still they followed Elias. For though he demanded more than any leader had a right to demand, he gave more than any leader had given. He never rested, never wavered, never showed doubt, and his fire kept them alive. Once, when a young ensign collapsed at his station, Elias knelt beside him, lifting him up, whispering words none else could hear, then returned to his chair as if carved from stone. His crew whispered among themselves that he was more than a captain now, that he had become something else, something that belonged to history. Still, the hunt never slowed. The Alien Alliance poured everything into it, bleeding ships and soldiers by the thousands. They called him the Phantom Captain, the Ghost of the Void, the human who refuses to die. Some whispered that he had already died and become something more. But to Elias, none of that mattered. He knew only this: they would never stop, and so neither could he. One night on the darkened bridge, as stars drifted past, one of his oldest officers asked him quietly, "Why keep running, Captain? Why not hide? Why not let the galaxy forget?" Elias looked out into the black sea of space and answered, "Because they will never forget. They will come for Earth, for our people, for everything we love. As long as I run, their eyes are on me, not on them." His officer stared at him in silence, understanding at last the burden Elias had chosen. He was not running to save himself. He was running to protect all of humanity. In the council chamber, as reports of yet another failed pursuit arrived, silence spread. At last, the High Warlord, towering above the others, spoke with a voice like iron. This ends now. If we must unite every empire, if we must burn every star, we will do it. We will not allow one human to shame us all. His words carried across the chamber like a decree of doom. And so fleets doubled, then tripled, the largest armada in history formed with one purpose only: to trap Elias Ward and erase the phantom that haunted their skies. And yet, even as the galaxy sharpened its blades, Elias sat on his bridge in silence, the glow of dying stars reflected in his eyes. His ship was failing, his crew worn thin, but his resolve was untouched. They will come, he whispered to himself, his voice calm, almost like prayer. Let them come. We are not finished. And far away, across countless worlds, alien civilians who once mocked humanity now lowered their voices and whispered too, not with laughter but with fear. For they all knew the truth now: the chase was not the end. It was only the beginning. The Resolute drifted in the shadow of a nameless asteroid field, its hull scorched, its engines weary, its crew running on little more than hope and discipline. The galaxy's greatest armada hunted them, fleets that filled the stars with fire, yet for the moment silence wrapped around the battered ship like a shroud. Inside, the crew gathered in the dim light of the command deck, their faces hollow from hunger, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Some whispered doubts too soft to reach their captain's ears. How long could one ship run? How long could one man outthink the fury of 1,000 worlds? But Elias Ward sat at the center, his chair rigid, his expression carved from iron. He knew his crew's doubt, felt their fear, yet he said nothing until the time came. And when he spoke at last, his voice was steady, deliberate, filled with a weight that made them lean closer. "You believe we are alone," he began, his gaze shifting slowly across them. "But humanity has never been alone. What you see in this ship, what we have endured, this is only a shadow of what we once were. Long before the galaxy mocked us, long before they called us weak, our ancestors built something greater. And now, it is time to wake it again." The crew stared, stunned, unsure if they had heard him correctly. "Wake what, Captain?" one officer whispered. Elias stood, his hands clasped behind his back, his silhouette tall in the pale glow of dying monitors. "The old empire," he said, the words sharp as blades. "The empire humanity buried." Murmurs spread through the crew, some shocked, some skeptical, some afraid. One young ensign frowned, his voice uncertain. "Sir, I thought it was only a story. A myth told in fragments, whispers of colonies no one has ever seen." Elias's eyes darkened with memory. "It was no myth. Humanity once reached farther than any of you can imagine. We fought wars you cannot picture, built weapons you cannot name, ruled stars the galaxy has long forgotten. But we fell into silence. We chose to hide, to bury what we were, to live in the shadows because we feared ourselves as much as others. The echo pulse was not the only relic of that age. There are more. And if we do not awaken them, we will vanish. Our enemies will erase us from history, and no one will remember we were ever here." The words carried through the bridge, filling the silence with fire. His crew looked at one another, torn between disbelief and awe. For if this was true, then humanity was not the small, fragile species the galaxy mocked. Humanity was something far older, far sharper, something that had only been sleeping. Elias moved to the star map, his hand gliding across glowing points until it stopped on a dark cluster far from any known trade route. "There," he said, his voice firm. "The Veil sector. Hidden behind storms, forgotten by all but a few. That is where the first vaults lie. That is where humanity left its sleeping fleet." The crew leaned forward, the map reflecting in their wide eyes. "A fleet," one whispered. "You mean more ships like this?" Elias's jaw tightened. "Not like this. Greater. Stronger. Ships built for war, built for survival. The kind of ships that can turn the chase against our hunters." For a moment silence hung in the air, then one officer spoke sharply, her fear breaking free. "Captain, if you awaken those weapons, the galaxy will never stop until we are ashes. You will paint a target on every human world, every colony, every child." Elias turned to her, his voice cold, unflinching. "And if I do not, there will be no colonies, no children, no Earth. There will be nothing. Do you not see?" They will never stop. They will hound us until we break. The only choice we have is to rise higher than their reach, to strike before they strike us. His words hung heavy, undeniable, and though fear lingered in their hearts, they knew he spoke truth. The crew agreed in silence, their doubts swallowed by the weight of survival. Engines lit, and the Resolute moved again, slipping into dark space, toward storms no alien dared to enter. The Veil sector loomed ahead, a maze of black clouds and lightning that tore ships apart. No sane captain entered it. No fleet dared follow. Yet Elias guided them in without hesitation, his eyes never leaving the charts as storms battered the ship and alarms wailed. Inside the storm's heart, the shadows parted to reveal something vast, something that stole the breath from every crew member who saw it. Towering in the darkness lay shapes of impossible size, silent giants that stretched across the void. Human warships, older than any living memory, their hulls scarred by forgotten wars, their lights long dead, but their presence undeniable. They drifted like a graveyard of titans, a sleeping army waiting to be awakened. Gasps filled the bridge. One officer whispered, his voice shaking, "They are real." Another fell to his knees, or breaking his strength. Elias stood tall, his eyes locked on the giants. "They are real," he said, his tone solemn. "And they are ours." He activated the old codes, words of command etched into the deep history of humanity, words only a captain of Earth could speak. At first nothing happened, only silence and the storm's endless roar. Then, slowly, one by one, the ships stirred. Lights flickered across their hulls, systems hummed, weapons awakened after centuries of sleep. The giants opened their eyes. The crew of the Resolute wept, some with joy, some with terror, for they knew what this meant. Humanity was not a whisper in the dark anymore. Humanity was rising again, with fire in its hands. Elias Ward turned to his crew, his face lit by the glow of ancient power. "This is our answer," he said. "This is why we cannot surrender. Because if humanity stands, the galaxy itself will tremble." And far away, as the alien armadas pressed closer, scouts caught fragments of energy surges within the Veil sector, signals that made their blood run cold. Reports rushed back to the council chambers, where generals stared at the data in disbelief. "Impossible," one muttered. "Those ships should not exist." Another slammed the table, his voice sharp with dread. "They are waking. The humans are waking their empire." The chamber fell into silence, and for the first time, none dared laugh, none dared mock. For the shadow they had once called weak had now shown its teeth, and the secret of humanity was no longer hidden. The storm of the Veil burned like fire around the Resolute, yet within its heart the awakening continued, titans stirring from centuries of silence, engines roaring like thunder as one by one the old warships of humanity rose from their slumber. The crew could hardly breathe as the void filled with colossi, black silhouettes glowing with golden veins of power, hulls plated in metals no alien science could match, weapons that whispered of forgotten wars and victories carved in ancient fire. Captain Elias Ward stood at the center of his bridge, his eyes fixed on the growing armada, his voice calm though or trembled in every soul around him. "This," he said softly, "is what they feared. This is what they tried to bury." His words were almost drowned out by the awakening chorus of engines as 1,000 ships came alive, responding to the codes only he carried, their systems aligning to his command, their targeting arrays locking onto the void beyond the storm where alien fleets waited to crush what they thought was a single broken vessel. Fear rippled through the alien admirals as signals reached them, data they could not deny, warnings that the humans had not only survived but unleashed something no one believed still existed. One commander screamed for reinforcements, another demanded a retreat, but pride chained them in place, and so their fleets pressed forward into the storm's edge, their warships burning bright against the darkness. Inside the Resolute, the crew gripped their stations, staring wide-eyed at the ancient fleet surrounding them, and though fear still lingered, it was now drowned beneath a rising flame of hope. Elias raised his hand, and the giants obeyed, shifting into formation with a precision that made even the most disciplined alien armadas look like scattered raiders. "For every world they burned," Elias said, his voice low but carried by comms across the fleet. "For every child they silenced. For every human who died mocked as weak, we answer." His command cut through the storm, and the ancient fleet unleashed its fury. The void erupted in fire as beams of pure energy, wider than cities, lanced out from humanity's awakened ships, cutting through alien hulls like paper, shattering shields the galaxy had once called unbreakable. Entire squadrons of enemy warships vanished in a single breath, their screams lost in the thunder of cannons older than the empires they served. Alien generals on distant flagships shouted orders in desperation, their formations breaking, their pride shattered as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. One by one their ships fell, burning, breaking, scattering into debris that glittered like dying stars. Still they tried to press forward, for retreat meant disgrace, yet every charge ended the same, their fleets torn apart by weapons that had slept too long, now unleashed with merciless precision. The crew of the Resolute could only watch in awe as the battle raged, their small ship now surrounded by gods of steel and flame, their voices trembling as they realized they were witnessing not just survival, but the rebirth of an empire. "We are not prey," Elias declared, his voice carried across both human and enemy channels. "We are the storm." His words struck deeper than any weapon, and even as alien admirals cursed his name, their soldiers whispered in fear, their morale crumbling beneath the weight of humanity's resurgence. Entire fleets, once arrogant, now scattered like frightened animals, their retreat a chaos of broken discipline and burning wrecks. Yet Elias pressed on, his orders sharp, relentless. No mercy for those who would erase us. No pause until they remember. And so the ancient fleet pursued, pushing the battle lines outward, tearing through one empire's armada after another, the galaxy watching in stunned silence as the humans, once mocked as fragile, now shattered the pride of powers that had ruled for centuries. News spread faster than the fire of battle, carried by fleeing scouts and broken survivors, reaching councils and courts across the stars. Worlds that had never heard the name Elias Ward whispered it now with fear and awe. In chambers once filled with laughter at humanity's expense, silence fell heavy. Old enemies who had once united to erase humans now turned to one another with unease, realizing too late that the shadow they had tried to crush was no shadow at all but a sleeping giant now awakened. And still the battle raged, wave after wave of alien reinforcements pouring into the storm, only to be torn apart by humanity's fleet, each defeat feeding the terror spreading across the galaxy. On the Resolute, the crew worked with renewed fire, every soul pushing beyond exhaustion as they fought beside ships older and mightier than their imaginations. Their fear had turned into faith, their despair into pride, for they now knew the truth. Humanity had never been weak. Humanity had only been silent. And in their silence they had grown sharper, darker, more dangerous than any species dared believe. As another alien dreadnought split apart under the fury of human cannons, one young ensign whispered, his voice trembling with awe, "The galaxy will never forget this day." Elias Ward heard him, but his eyes did not leave the burning void, his jaw set, his tone like stone. "Good," he said. "That was the point." And as the last wave of alien ships broke apart, as the survivors fled in panic, the storm around the Veil echoed with the fire of victory. The old warships drifted silent once more, their weapons cooling, their engines dimming, but their presence now a promise, a warning carved into the stars. Humanity had risen again, and the galaxy, no matter how vast, would never again look at them the same way. Yet Elias Ward did not smile, did not celebrate. He stood at the heart of his bridge, his eyes shadowed, for he knew this battle was only the beginning. The galaxy would not accept their rebirth quietly. More fleets would come. More enemies would rise. And the cost of what he had awakened would stretch beyond victory. Still, his voice was steady as he gave the final command of the battle, "Prepare the fleet. The war is not over." The galaxy burned with whispers of humanity's return, rumors carried like wildfire through every council chamber and war court, whispers that turned into shouts of fear and rage. The fleets that had once mocked humans now shivered in silence, their admirals haunted by the memory of ships older than empires tearing their armadas apart, their soldiers broken by the sound of Elias Ward's voice declaring that humans did not surrender. Yet for every world that trembled, others began to plot, their leaders vowing revenge, swearing that no fragile species would ever be allowed to rise and challenge them again. And so, while humanity's hidden fleet gathered in the storm of the Veil, the galaxy outside prepared for war, forging alliances of fear, enemies once divided now united in a single purpose, to erase humanity forever. On the Resolute, the crew felt the weight of what they had done. The joy of victory still glowed in their eyes, but beneath it was a shadow, a silent knowledge that the war ahead would not be a single battle, but a fire that could consume them all. Elias Ward stood at the heart of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the stars. He had awakened something no one could put back to sleep, and though he did not regret it, he carried the burden like iron on his shoulders. His officers looked to him, waiting for words, waiting for reassurance, but Elias gave them only truth. "We have lit a fire," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "The galaxy will answer with fury. Many of us will not see the end of what comes. But hear me now, if humanity falls, we fall standing, not begging. If we are remembered only as ashes, let them call us the ashes that burned empires." His words cut through the silence, and though fear still pressed against their hearts, the crew stood taller, for they knew he asked not for survival, but for defiance, and that was something every human could give. Beyond the veil, emissaries and spies sent word of alien coalitions forming, fleets so vast they blotted out suns, resources pooled from a dozen species that had once despised each other now bound together by one cause, fear of humans. Yet within that fear was also doubt, cracks that spread through the mighty alliances as smaller powers whispered to one another. If humans could shatter great fleets, perhaps siding with them might bring survival, perhaps the storm Elias carried could be the shield they needed against their own enemies. Thus, even as war brewed, seeds of rebellion spread in secret, worlds looking to humanity not as prey, but as a weapon sharp enough to cut their masters. Elias knew of these whispers, but he did not place faith in them. "Allies come and go," he told his crew. "Fear makes them loyal, and fear makes them betray. We trust only ourselves." And so humanity began to prepare, their hidden fleet awakening in full, their old forges lit once more, their weapons tested against the silence of deep space. Each day more ships stirred, and each day the burden of command pressed harder upon Elias Ward, for with every weapon he brought back to life, the cost grew heavier. He remembered Earth, its oceans and skies, its children who knew nothing of this war, and he wondered how much blood their survival would demand. Still, he gave the order again and again, because he knew the choice was not between war and peace, but between war and extinction. When the galaxy's grand coalition finally moved, the stars shook. Fleets larger than any seen in living memory gathered on the edge of the veil, hundreds of thousands of ships united in a storm of firepower that could erase entire sectors. Alien commanders spoke with cold confidence, broadcasting their message across the void: "Surrender your relics. Disarm your fleets. Humanity will kneel, or humanity will burn." The message reached the Resolute, and for a moment silence fell over the bridge as the crew waited for Elias to answer. He stood unmoving, his jaw set, his eyes dark. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper, yet it carried like thunder across every human channel. "We told you already. Humans do not surrender." With those words, he gave the command, and the storm began again. The battle that followed was not a clash but a cataclysm. Entire sectors lit with fire as humanity's awakened fleet surged forward, their weapons roaring like a forgotten god, tearing through the coalition's first wave, their shields breaking, their formations collapsing. Yet the galaxy's armada was vast, and for every enemy destroyed, 10 more pressed forward, their fury endless, their numbers overwhelming. Ships fell on both sides, steel breaking, fire spilling across the stars. The crew of the Resolute fought until their hands bled, their voices raw from shouting orders, their bodies trembling from exhaustion. But still they fought, because Elias Ward did not bend, because his voice never wavered. "Hold the line," he commanded, again and again, and they obeyed, even as the void filled with wreckage and the galaxy itself seemed to split under the weight of the war. And then, when the coalition's admirals believed victory was near, when their fleets pressed hardest, Elias revealed the last secret of humanity's empire. From the depths of the veil came ships larger than any the galaxy had ever seen, fortress vessels that dwarfed moons, their weapons so vast they could split entire fleets in a single strike. They emerged like mountains of steel, their cannons opening in silence, and the galaxy's greatest armada broke before them, shattered into chaos, its admirals screaming in disbelief, its soldiers fleeing in terror. Humanity had paid the price of awakening, but with that price came power, power that turned the tide of empires. The battle did not end in peace, nor in surrender, but in fire that would echo across the stars for centuries. And when it was done, when silence fell over fields of wreckage and drifting corpses, Elias Ward stood at the center of it all, his ship battered, his crew broken, his eyes hollow but unyielding. He had not won peace. He had not ended the war. He had only bought survival, at a cost that would haunt them forever. As the smoke of dying fleets drifted through the void, as the galaxy stared in fear and awe at what humanity had become, Elias spoke his final words to the stars, his voice carried across every surviving channel. "You wanted us erased," he said, his tone cold as stone. "Instead, you will remember us. Remember this: we are human. and humans do not surrender. His message burned into history, a scar no empire could erase, a promise carved into the bones of the galaxy. Humanity had defied extinction, but in doing so, they had set the stars on fire. The price of defiance was blood, endless and heavy, and Elias Ward knew it would never end. Yet as long as one human ship remained, as long as one human voice spoke, the galaxy would tremble. For the giant had awakened, and the galaxy had already paid the price.